much, Mr. Cloud.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Good morning. Thanks for being here. And look forward to the conversation. Appreciate the input that you're giving. Of course, we do have many challenges facing our nation. You mentioned a few of them. One that was not mentioned that is of primary concern, and one of the biggest challenges to our nation, of course, is our national debt and the fiscal issues. You know, this program was cut for budget reasons back in 1995 when our national debt was a resounding $5 trillion, and we would love to be there today now, of course. On the other hand, we do have very real scientific challenges, especially as we consider the global threats that we face, and need to ensure that we're able to meet those challenges for our nation. I was wondering, Mr. McCord, could you kind of recap some of the resources that are available to us as congressmen? And when?
Thank you. Yes. The primary resources that we looked at in the study are support agencies, Congressional Research Service, not represented here today, which tends to do the shorter turnaround taskers from Congress, and then the Government Accountability Office, which is really the main heavy hitter in the field today. That is something that is under the control of the legislative branch. We're well aware that there's many resources out there. The National Academy. I worked on the Hill for 24 years before my time at DoD. My boss was deluged with books that people would come by to give him on topics of every imaginable subject.
I have a stack on my desk as well.
So Dr. Manley referred to this, I think the most advised body. So we recognize that there's the outside resources that you have to assess whether someone has an axe to grind that makes you question their input. In addition to the scientific community, what I think was driving our recommendation for an advisor, and perhaps also the interesting recreating OTA, is that there should be somebody that is responsible only to you, that is a voice, that is a coordinator, that that you can trust. So. Right now, you have.
It seems to me, though, that I mean, and this has been touched on, but that the greatest challenge isn't the amount of information; it's the ability to triage and get helpful and effective information for decision making. And so, I appreciate the fact that the conversation's kind of been geared that way a little bit. I mean, we have the leading scientists. Access to them across the whole country. We had Bruce Banner in here the other day, so we have access to people. But the question for me is, how do we get effective information to people? Now, we've been talking about the fact of a bipartisan effort here. I think the better term is nonpartisan, of course, when we're talking about science, because really the data should lead it, not one party or both parties. But I don't have a whole lot of confidence that necessarily putting that within the legislative branch produces that. Indeed, in the past, reports were often taken too long, and some were withheld by the chair of the committee and not given access to the rest of Congress. And so I'm wondering if in your proposal that do you have any recommendations that address those issues?
We certainly agree that you need unbiased, nonpartisan advice that you can trust. When we talk about putting, for example, adding an advisor to key committees, not to this committee, of course, this committee is a little bit of an exception in terms of already having the expertise on this issue, but on other committees, we certainly do not advocate having Democratic advisors and Republican advisors. That would be, I think, we'd be very, very much regret if that's the road that someone ended up going down. But we do think that the committees that produce the legislation don't have enough capability. Mr. Beyer referred to, of course, the even greater challenge in a personal office, and it is my experience that I think it's probably unavoidable that organizations like GAO or an advisor, if you follow our recommendation, or OTA, if you create OTA, they're going to have to prioritize and probably put committee requests first, unless there's a really large investment in capability. I think that's going to be a fact of life. But on the team that you do have does have to be nonpartisan, And I started my
Good,
career.
I wanted to get one more question in for
Sorry.
Mr. Pearsons. You've been producing reports in the GAO, and my understanding is you've been able to get them to us a lot quicker. Previously, you know, when they would take a year or two, sometimes would get a request for a report, it wouldn't be to the next Congress, completely different people making the decisions to get that information. And so you've been able to do that much quicker. Is that true? Could you speak to that?
Yes, thank you for the question. Thanks for the compliment, Mr. Cloud. We are working on cycle times to get down to several weeks for the single pagers that you have in your packet, the S&T spotlights, which are just brief 101s on a technology, up to an intermediate scale, which is about a 6 to 9 month turnaround descriptive only, and then up to 12 to 18 months in doing that. We do have that advantage of our congressional protocols and our extensive review process. We think we can have the quality and still meet the operational tempo. And that is part of, for the new science tech assessment and analytics team, our strategy is to be content focused, not just deliver a report per se, even though, as the studies rightly point out independently with Belfer and Napa, that there's still the need for the larger studies, but there's also the need for this agility to reach out and also be proactive to essentially say, Congress, you haven't asked for this yet, but we're seeing something that's coming, and we just want you to know about it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.